Our call to worship this morning comes from Hebrews and chapter 13. In verse 15 it says, "Through him, then let us continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to God, that is, the fruit of lips that acknowledge his name." Let's do that together.
Come, people of the risen King, who delight into praise. Come all and tune your hearts to sing to the morning star of grace. From the shifting shadows of the earth, we will lift our eyes to him, where steady arms of mercy reach to gather children in. Rejoice, rejoice, let every tongue rejoice. One heart, one voice, O Church of Christ, rejoice. Come those whose joy is morning sun and the sweeping through the night. Come those who tell of battles won and those struggling in the fight. For his perfect love will never change and his mercies never cease, but follow us through all our days with the certain hope of peace. Rejoice, rejoice, let every tongue rejoice. One heart, one voice, O Church of Christ, rejoice. Come young and old from every land, men and women of the faith. Come those with full or empty hands, find the riches of his grace. Over all the world his people sing, shore to shore we hear them call. The truth that cries through every age, our God is all in all. Rejoice, rejoice, let every heart rejoice. One heart, one voice, O Church of Christ, rejoice.
Ezekiel chapter 34. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not your shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd, and when they were scattered they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered all over the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd, and so has been plundered, and has become food for all the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. For this is what the Sovereign Lord says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on the day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in all the settlements of the land. I will tend them in good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep, and have them lie down, declares the Sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. As for you, my flock, this is what the Sovereign Lord says. I will judge between one sheep and another, and between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? Must my flock feed on what you have trampled, and drink what you have muddied with your feet? Therefore, this is what the Sovereign Lord says to them. See, I myself will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep. Because you shove with flank and shoulder, butting all the weak sheep with your horns until you have driven them away, I will save my flock, and they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and another. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd. I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince amongst them. I, the Lord, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and rid the land of savage beasts, so they may live in the wilderness and sleep in forests in safety. I will make them and the places surrounding my hill a blessing. I will send down showers in season. There will be showers of blessing. The trees will yield fruit, and the ground will yield its crops. The people will be secure in their land. They will know that I am the Lord, when I break the bars of their yoke and rescue them from the hands of those who enslave them. They will no longer be plundered by the nations, nor will wild animals devour them. They will live in safety, and no one will make them afraid. I will provide for them a land renowned for its crops, and they will no longer be victims of famine in the land, or bear the scorn of the nations. Then they will know that I, the Lord their God, am with them, and that they, the Israelites, are my people, declares the Sovereign Lord. You are my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, and I am your God, declares the Sovereign Lord.
And the sea, your river runs with love for me, and I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and I will daily lift my hands, for I will always sing of when your love came down. Yeah, I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love. I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. Over the mountains and the sea, your river runs with love for me, and I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and I will daily lift my hands, for I will always sing of when your love came down. I could sing of your love forever. 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 Oh, I feel like dancing. It's foolishness, I know. When the world has seen the light, they will dance with joy like we're dancing could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. I could sing of your love forever. Over the mountains and the sea, your river runs with love for me, and I will open up my heart and let the healer set me free. I'm happy to be in the truth, and I will daily lift my hands, for I will always sing of when your love came down. Yeah, I could sing of your love forever. 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 I could sing of your love forever.
Let's pray together. Lord, as we come to you this morning, help us to listen to your word and help us to offer you prayers and praise. Lord, today's passage is a tough one. Help us to look at your word, listen to it, and evaluate it, how it impacts our life. You are a great God, and we thank you that you teach us gently usually, but sometimes you are blunt, as you were with your people so long ago in the Bible reading today. Help us to hear you today. In your name, amen.
I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us.
While there are many references to shepherds and the responsibilities of leaders in the Old Testament, we usually look at the passage that put the shepherds or the leaders in a good light. One of the dominant passages dealing with the imagery of a shepherd as a leader is really looking at shepherds from a negative perspective. Ezekiel 34 points out that the leaders of God's people were not necessarily doing the right thing. And in fact, people who were leading were not doing it with a correct shepherdly attitude. The shepherds of Israel were its rulers and leaders, both spiritual and political. And this chapter of Ezekiel that was read to us earlier demonstrates God's reaction to the appointed shepherds, in this case, as I said, priests and kings, when they fail to care responsibly for God's people. This denunciation of the shepherds is sobering in that it evokes from all who have pastoral responsibilities the need to do self-examination. If we all are to be involved in caring for people, which I believe is the true biblical concept of pastoral care, then this evaluation needs to be done within the biblical perspective, and we need to evaluate both the actual pastoral care and the motives for pastoral care. The pastoral role involves caring for others, not striving for oneself. There's a few points that I want to look at, and the first one is God's evaluation. And remember that God sees the lot, both motives and actions. It says in verse 1 of Ezekiel 34, "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. Prophesy and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to the shepherds of Israel who take care of themselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat curds, clothe yourself with wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock." Wow, tough statement. Really what God is pointing out is that these shepherds or carers are in it for their own personal gain, eating curds and clothed with wool and slaughtering and eating the best animals. It sounds to me like they're living the good life, eating the best of the Old Testament stuff that's available to them. And eating the best is seen as a blessing and sometimes as a status symbol. To eat the best means the closer you get to the king's table at a feast, and the good bits are at the king's end. So these people are exalted in their status because of their position as shepherds. How do we place that into a contemporary context? Basically, people using leadership status for their own ends is the comparison. This kind of thinking borders on corruption sometimes. Using people to get what you want, being on a committee to further your own personal desires or agenda, being in a job because it has an element of respect for you. And this is where God gets really blunt. Look at the results in verse 4. You have strengthened the weak. Let me say that again. You have not strengthened the weak or healed the sick or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered all over the mountains and on every hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Wow. Verse 4 gives us a basic outline of Christian duty for others. It says in verse 4, you have not strengthened the weak and healed the sick and bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays and searched for the lost. This is what we should have done, or they should have done. Strengthened the weak, healed the sick, bound up the injured, brought back the strays, and searched for the lost. And if we look at that list, those two are our responsibilities. Each person who claims to be a Christian, we are to strengthen the people who are in a state of weakness, both physically and spiritually. We are to heal the sick. In other words, be with them when they are sick, pray for them, aid them in their recovery. Bind up the injured. Physical pain needs assistance. So does emotional pain and spiritual pain. To bind means to wrap up. So we need to wrap them up with love. Not just a hello cuddle, but provide for their emotional needs. Build them up, encourage them. At this point in their spiritual development, it might be a good idea to stay away from mentioning their bad points. They need love and they need encouragement. Bringing back the strays, I think this concept, it takes more love to allow someone to return to the fold or to the church than to find new sheep. Why? If people have left, they have a reason. Sometimes there's an issue. Here's where the rubber hits the road. Forgive as Christ forgives. You can't expect them to do that if you don't first show them love. If we are truly to love each other, you need to be the one to start loving. To bring people back by forgiving and loving him is part of our task. And searching for the lost is often the glamour job in church circles, the perceived evangelist. I think I need to mention here that no ministry really is any harder than any other if it's done to maximum effort. Sure, different gifts, different situations, but no harder. Someone said to me the other week, I couldn't get up and preach every week. It would be just too stressful. I said I couldn't go and work with preschoolers every day. It would just be too stressful. I've been an evangelist, a youth worker, a regional ministry coordinator, a pastor, and just at the moment I'm not sure where I fit in within all of those descriptions. They're all different stresses. I don't think your job is any harder than anyone else's. God gives the gifts to those who he chooses to get that job done. Searching for the lost is about us using our God-given gifts, talents, and abilities in situations that we find ourselves to help people get found by God. This job is only one job, and it's linked to all the others with pastoral care. If we don't get it right, what happens? This is where the passage moves on. It says in verse 5, so they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for all the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. Basically, if we don't do pastoral care, the church gets scattered. The church is weakened and the individual is endangered. Abdication of one's responsibility to care for others has an effect on the church and on the spiritual well-being of each individual. A scattered and even greater tragedy. No one is looking for them. No one cares. The warnings are there. And look at God's response to this. It says, again in Ezekiel 34, verse 7, therefore you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, because my flock lacks a shepherd and so has been plundered and has become food for all the wild animals, and because my shepherds did not search for my flock, but cared for themselves rather than for my flock, therefore, O shepherds, hear what the word of the Lord is. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and they will no longer be food for them. Let's just flip back a little bit to verse 10 again. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. We are to be held accountable for the people we are responsible for. So, who are we responsible for? Who are we being held to account for? Jesus put it differently. Who is my neighbour? Jesus told the story of the Samaritan. And there's the question, who is my neighbour? And the neighbour is the one who had mercy, the one who is in neighbourly with us, that to those in need in the church and out of the church and all who have need. That's a big neighbourhood. We are accountable for the people sitting around us and those sitting and sleeping at home today that we have contact with. A neighbour in this context is someone who we have contact with. Actually, anyone we have contact with. We are to care for them and lead them to Jesus. We don't have time to look at the rest of the chapter, but one passage that caught my eye within the chapter is from verse 17. As for you, my flock, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I will judge between one sheep and another, between rams and goats. Is it not enough for you to feed on the good pasture? Must you also trample the rest of your pasture with your feet? Is it not enough for you to drink clear water? Must you also muddy the rest with your feet? Must my flock feed on what you have trampled and drink what you have muddied with your feet? God is addressing us as well, isn't he? His flock. And telling us to look after the resources that we have. Don't trample the food. Don't trample the talents that other people have that are useful within the church's situation, the church's development. Don't waste the refreshing water. Don't waste the things that give people refreshment. I need to be honest here. Don't waste the gifts that God has given you. Don't use them half-heartedly and make everything muddy. Certainly don't stop someone else using their gift to encourage others. Don't let others have second best because one of us is selfish. If people want to grow, let them. If people want to encourage, let them. If people want to have a go at ministry, let them. Just don't stuff it up for other people. Ezekiel goes on in verse 20 and says, Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord says to them. See, I myself will judge between the fat and the lean sheep. Because you shove with flank and shoulder, butting all the weak sheep with your horns until you have driven them away. I will save my flock, and they will no longer be plundered. I will judge between one sheep and the other. I will place over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will tend them. He will tend them and be their shepherd, and I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. The Lord has spoken. The warning is not to be pushy, not to get selfish and not to get picky. Why? Because it mentions one shepherd, my servant David. This is referring to Jesus, the one shepherd, that he came from the line of David. Jesus is the good shepherd. Remember that Jesus is the head shepherd. He has us to do shepherdly work, but it's for him. We are responsible to Jesus. God is saying, don't push and shove my people. Jesus sees what you do. Deal with sheep with integrity. Bless you.
I am surrounded on every side, can't see the light of day, but I am persuaded beyond all hope, you won't let go of me. I stake my claim on every word you say, you will not be late. I will sing through fire and thunder, 'cause you are on my side. I trust you with my life. I know my story isn't over, even against all odds. You are a faithful God. You're faithful God. The darkest of weather, though I inside.